Look out, Michigan. Look out, Ohio State. Penn State believes 2023 could be their year. The defense looks locked and loaded. Did you watch the Rose Bowl? Well, most of those guys are coming back. We talk about Penn State football as we typically do with Tim Aiden and Marty Leap from Black Shoe Diaries. Guys, great to see you. So let's start with the coaching change that we just talked about before we started to record with Dionne Barnes, who was certainly a playmaker during his 3 years in Happy Valley as a player, who is now coaching the defensive line.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a good hire. They have a little bit of risk here. He's never been a position coach, but had his 3 years as a GA, was promoted to analyst when his GA time ended after the Rose Bowl. And he turned down multiple MAC offers to go be a defensive line coach in the MAC to be an analyst. So, it's very obvious the guy just wanted to be at Penn State. It's a risky hire, but it's a hire that has a lot of potential. He's already shown the ability to develop into a potentially elite recruiter. He has got more ties to the city of Philadelphia in football than maybe anybody else in college football right now. It's a good hire. I like the hire. There's some risks to it, but I think worst case scenario, you're bringing in a guy who the defensive line room made no secrets. This is who they wanted to be hired when John Scott Jr. left the NFL. So he's very familiar with the room. He's very familiar with the guys they've been recruiting. Obviously, he's very familiar with what Manny Diaz wants his defensive lineman to do in his defense. Sometimes just having that continuity can be as big of a thing as anything. And like I said, I think Barnes has the potential to develop into one of the best defensive line recruiters in the Big Ten. And again, it's obvious he wanted to be at Penn State. So it's a guy who I could see settling in and being content being a position coach at Penn State for a long time.
Why not take a chance on a guy who's obviously the players all love, who's been praised heavily by Manny Diaz and James Franklin. And most importantly, he's got the Philly recruiting ties. And that's an area where maybe earlier on in the Franklin era that they were struggling to recruit in, and he's helped make some inroads there. So I think this is overall, I'm pretty darn excited for this hire, see how it works out.
Now, Barnes is not going to get the privilege of working with PJ Mustipher, who's off to the NFL. But besides that, most of the guys back on the defensive front. So I guess we start with the interior and work our way to the edges.
Yeah, I think right now your starting defensive tackle is probably Hakeem Beamon, who started alongside Mustipher last year, and Keziah Izzard. Izzard was suspended for the first 5 games last year, and they never really gave a reasoning what his off-the-field issues were. But when he came back, those last, what would have been 7-8 games, whatever it was, he flashed. He showed some good stuff, showed some good twitch. Defensive tackle, probably the one position on this team more than any other you have the biggest question marks going into the season at. And they have some good players there. I like Izzard and Beamon a lot. Zane Durant, who's going to be a true sophomore, for fans of Penn State or the Big Ten, some strong Kevin Givens vibes from Zane Durant. Probably just a little more quick off the ball. Jordan Vandenberg, another high motor guy. So, I mean, they have some bodies there. You're not sure about the depth, and you don't have that big kind of space eater that you had in the past with a guy like Mustipher, which is going to be important against the Michigans, against the Iowas, against the Wisconsins, if you'd happen to run into them at Indy, if everything goes well, But yeah, I think defensive tackle, even though it's probably the position you have the most question about on the entire roster going into the season, it's still a position you feel good about because you have 2 guys in Izzard and Beamon who've shown good things, and you have a few other guys in Durant and, as I mentioned, with Vandenberg and Devon Elise, who's also played a lot of football for this team. So there's guys there. You're just not sure you kind of have the guy at defensive tackle. But, hey, sometimes having those 4 or 5 really good options can be better than having that one great option and 3 or 4 question marks also.
On the outside, I'm excited to see another year of Adisa Isaac and, Chop Robinson bringing the heat with the pass rush. And let's not forget Denai Dennis Sutton, who flashed when he got playing time last year. Another offseason in the strength and conditioning program, and I'm sure he will flash even more. So it's just Obviously, the interior may be lacking a bit in depth, but as Marty, mentioned with Keziah Izzard and Hakeem Beamon, as well as Zane Durant, I think between those three, they should be a solid nucleus there. So D-line is that's probably one spot that I'm not terribly worried about. Maybe just slightly worried about the defensive tackle depth, but otherwise, feeling fairly bullish about it.
Yeah, the other thing about defensive tackle, I think it's very much a position. As long as you don't have any major injury issues, you're going to be okay. It's just that's my concern. Is you might be 1 or 2 injuries away from having some serious problems at DT. But defensive end, Tim, I agree with you completely. Zariah Fisher, also another guy I'm super high on, was expected to contribute big time in the pass rush last year. I don't think we ever got confirmation on what it was, but was widely speculated. He tore his Achilles in spring ball and was back playing by November, which is insane. So I think you throw him into the rush. I think this defensive end room, you can make a strong argument. It might be the best group of defensive ends in the Big Ten going into the season. That top three is just those top three with Abdul Carter. Obviously, we'll get to when we get the linebackers. That might be, you're going to be hard pressed to find too many pass rushes in the country. They're going to be better than that group. And hey, that's a big reason why people are so bullish on Penn State and on this defense going into the year. And a big reason why you're going to see them littered in top 5, 8, 10 lists, because this pass rush, man, it could be something special.
Good stuff as always from Marty and Tim. You can join them on Black Shoe Diaries. You see the indication right there on the banner, blackshoediaries.com on SB Nation, covering Penn State athletics. And of course, we're in the midst of spring football in Happy Valley. So moving on to the linebackers, who stands out there, and how do we feel about that unit coming into 2023?
Yeah, these linebackers, I mean, Penn State's linebacker, everybody knows that. I mean, you look at Micah Parsons in recent years, but this linebacker group might be the best group they've had. And it's going back a ways, maybe like Mowdy and Hodges in 2012 or so. Abdul Carter, legitimate All-American kind of guy. There's definitely a universe where we get to the end of the year and you're talking about Abdul Carter and Harold Perkins, from LSU as the two best linebackers in the country. Abdul Carter wears number 11. For those who don't know, you don't just get handed number 11 as a linebacker at Penn State. It was LeVar Arrington. It was Navarro Bowman. It was Brandon Bell as a senior helping Penn State win a Big Ten title in 2016. It was Micah Parsons, and now it's Abdul Carter. You've got to be a special player to be a linebacker. We're number 11 to Penn State, and he made the stick proud last year. I think by the end of this year, you could be talking about the best defensive player in the Big Ten, one of the best defensive players in the country. But it goes deeper than just Carter. You have Curtis Jacobs, who was a 5-star recruit as well, who honestly I thought was going to go pro after last year because he had a tremendous season. He's back, has beefed up some this offseason, which I think to me indicates that Penn State is prepping. Manny Diaz likes to run a lot of 4-2-5. And last year, one thing that drove Penn State fans nuts at times was them not getting Carter and Jacobs on the field enough as their two linebackers in that 4-2-5. The fact that Jacobs is beefed up this offseason tells me that they plan on using those two in that set. And then at Mike linebacker, you have Kobe King and Tyler Elsdon, who, I mean, both showed some good things last year. King's the better athlete of the two, twin brother of cornerback Kalen King. And I thought by the end of the year, Kobe was really starting to come on and flash some good stuff. And even in the two deep, I mean, you have Dom DeLuca, who started his career as a walk-on, but just he's your kind of like stereotypical scrappy Penn State linebacker, always in the right spot, never going to miss a tackle. You have Tony Rojas, the true freshman, coming in, who's an elite athlete, who looks ready to contribute. This linebacker group, the starting three, is the best starting three they've had in a very long time, and there's some sneaky good depth there also. So yeah, there's definitely a lot of excitement for linebackers, and I mean, obviously, if you're a Penn State fan, you know we take our linebacker play pretty seriously, and there's a lot of excitement around linebacker this year.
Absolutely, Marty. I'll just add on Tony Rojas. I don't know if I heard you mention, but Tony Rojas, true freshman who enrolled early. He's a blue chip recruit out of my neck of the woods in Fairfax, Virginia, well, the DC, Maryland, Virginia area. And by all accounts, it sounds like he is crushing it thus far for winter workouts and spring ball. I think he's a guy I'm going to keep an eye on, especially since Franklin said they're going to try to have a more traditional spring football game this year. So if he comes along the way I think he will, he's another guy who's going to be a significant part of that rotation. I don't see him as a starter, but he'll definitely see more playing time as the season goes on. It's kind of like what happened with Abdul Carter last year. So like Marty said, I'm feeling pretty darn good about linebacker U.
Well, it's not necessarily cornerback U, but Joey Porter Jr. and Keelan King were two outstanding performers, of course, and they're going to be missing from the secondary. So where do we take it from there?
Well, you have Keelan King back for one more year. He'll start obviously going to get some preseason All-American type hype. Just a really, really good cornerback. I mean, I understand Joey Porter Jr. got all the love because of his length at corner, but I would make the argument that Keelan King is the better pure cornerback of the two. Outside of him, you have Johnny Dixon, who transferred into the program from South Carolina ahead of the 2021 season. Has quietly played really good football for Penn State. He'll compete with North Carolina transfer Storm Duck for that other starting job. Storm Duck, first and foremost, obviously, and first teamer on the all-name team. But played really good at North Carolina his first 2 years, battled some injuries last year. And obviously, when we watched North Carolina football last year, there's a reason Mac Brown fired his entire coaching staff on the defense side of the ball. But all reports in spring ball with Storm Duck has came in, been a great veteran presence, competing for a captainship, it looks like. That the way they look at it in their mind, they have 3 starters at cornerback in those 3. You're also going to see a lot of Daquan Hardy, their nickelback, who's been that nickelback for 4 years now. And true sophomore Cam Miller, who last year by the end of the year was playing a decent amount. Kid out of Florida, played some really good competition in high school, obviously, down there. And I'd also keep an eye on true freshman Elliott Washington, another Florida kid, was committed to Alabama for a long time before he flipped to Penn State. Could be a really, really good cornerback here. Another kid who I think they could play early if they needed to, probably won't need to, but I still think he's just a name to keep tucked away, and you'll probably see a good amount of reps this year. But yeah, even with losing Joey Porter, cornerback is still in a really, really good spot this season. And I think that's another reason why, there's a lot of reason for optimism for this defense. Cause you look in modern day college football, you got to stop the pass first and foremost. And when you have the potential to have one of the best pass rushes in the country combined with one of the best cornerback rooms in the country, which is where Penn State's at right now, your pass defense can be as solid as anybody's.
Johnny Dixon back as well. But there's a good share of depth in that cornerback slot. So I'm really I'm also excited to see what they're made of. Really the defense as a whole, I think, Marty, we can both agree we're feeling pretty bullish about it, like even more so than we did last year.
Storm Duck played 29 games at Carolina with over 100 tackles in his career, 5 picks, 1 he took to the house. Yeah, great name, familiar name for people that like college football. An easy name to remember, no doubt. Moving over to the safety spot, Jair Brown gone. Your thoughts about how that sets up, Marty?
Yeah, with safety, it's a spot. I really like what's in the room. I mean, Jair Brown, I think if you didn't watch a lot of Penn State football and even kind of watching as a casual football fan, you wouldn't truly appreciate everything Tig Brown did for this defense. There's just so many times you'd see him out there getting guys in position. You'd see him read a play beautifully and force it back inside, force it outside, whatever it may be. Just the way he would roll coverages, mess with quarterbacks, things of that nature. It's going to be a lot to replace, but they've got the talent to do it. Keaton Ellis, a kid from State College, going into his 5th year, getting his COVID year and using it, probably going to start. Jalen Reed, who actually led all safeties on this team in snaps last year by the end of the year, going to play a lot as well, especially when Penn State goes to that 4-2-5 base, because he can kind of walk down as almost like a box linebacker. But the two kids at safety that everybody's buzzing about this spring are sophomores KJ Winston and Zakee Wheatley. Both have that kind of just playmaker safety ability in them. Wheatley was their turnover king of spring ball last year and then again of fall camp. And I remember at one point as a freshman last year, keep in mind, I think he forced a turnover in something like 5 straight games where he forced a fumble, had an interception, recovered a fumble. He's just one of those guys that just finds the football. So I think safety is a position you could see early in the season. You might have one or two of those plays where somebody's wide open back there because the safety didn't roll over coverage and you're scratching your head saying, what are you doing? But I think that just kind of comes from busting in, having to replace Tig as the leader of that secondary. But you've got a lot of talent back there. I mean, like I said, Winston and Wheatley are two guys people are buzzing about. Reed and Ellis were both 4-star recruits who've played a lot of football. Mekhi Flowers, another local kid who was a borderline top 100 prospect last year, going into his redshirt freshman season now, could potentially factor in there as well. There's a lot of talent back there, and I think that Winston and Wheatley duo in time could become a very good one. So again, it's gonna be difficult to replace Brown and everything he brought to the defense, but there's a lot of talent in that safety room, and you know how it is, Mark. If you got talent at a position, usually things tend to be okay, and they've definitely got talent at safety.
Well, as we look past the personnel breakdown, anything on the recruiting path, anything in spring practice that's been picked up that's worth noting?
Yeah, I mean, with recruiting, it's a busy time right now. You know, you're in spring ball, you're going to be getting kids on campus. I think with Penn State too, a little bit of a curveball this spring because you have Marcus Hagans and Dionne Barnes joining the staff. You know, when you get new position coaches, especially wide receiver coach and defense line coach, which are usually two of your top recruiting guys, you're going to see a shake of recruiting boards. Excuse me, you're going to see interest from kids pop up more and that sort of thing. So I think that'll be something to watch. Starting to get the vibe on those two, both as recruiters and position coaches. And, you know, I think spring ball as a whole, you know, I think from now until the start of the season, you can't talk Penn State football without mentioning Drew Allar at least once. There was some hubbub earlier in the spring that there was rumors he was in a walking boot, maybe on a scooter on campus, all this nonsense. But he, over spring break, there was videos posted of him back at home in Ohio working out with his personal quarterback trainer. At every spring practice the media has been to thus far, he's been in full pads. He's been going through things. So everything seems okay there. But yeah, it's just going to be exciting to, you know, spring football is always exciting, but whenever you have a team like Penn State where you think you've got a pretty legitimate shot at being a playoff contender this season, that just kind of adds a little bit more excitement to it. And especially when you've got a quarterback the caliber of Allar that you're looking to break in. And yeah, it's an exciting time of year. And, you know, the whole hope springs eternal kind of thing that goes with this time of year for both college football and baseball, I feel. But yeah, it's an exciting time, and you know, it should be a really, really fun fall in Penn State.
I'll add, Marty. I forget where I read it. I don't know if it's on which it was 24/7 or BWI, but I remember there was reason about how the coaching staff mentioned they wanted, or Gershon said they want to get. It seemed like they want to get the most reps for Bo Prabula, the backup quarterback, because they know what they have in Drew Allar, and he's clearly the number one guy, but also they seem to want to be able to work Prabula's skill sets into some offensive packages, you know, maybe kind of sort of like they did with Tommy Stevens back when it was him and Trace McSorley. But you know, I would keep an eye out for Bo Prabula's usage this fall. I mean, he brings a different set of skills than Drew Allar does. They mentioned like Allar is more similar to Sean Clifford than, you know, Bo Prabula is to those two. So, you know, Prabula is a more, I guess, mobile kind of guy. He has a good arm too, but I'm really curious to see what packages they draw up with him in mind. But it sounds like the staff wants to get both quarterbacks involved this year.
Tim, we appreciate it. Marty, you as well. Everybody jump on over to Black Shoe Diaries and track Penn State football through the spring and everything else going on in the athletic department. All right, guys, we will see you soon. As soon as we get some word out of spring practice or anything else going on. We will track you down as always.
Sure thing, Mark.
Sounds good.
Yeah.